Clark family hometown of Fredericksburg, Virginia. The bronze plaque acknowledges George Rogers Clark's service in the American Revolutionary War and his victories over the British in the Northwest Territory. It seemed like an odd thing for them to dedicate a marker in Virginia when they were living in Muncie, and then I learned more. I was a member of the collections committee at Minnetrista, and when I discovered this particular fact, I knew there were hundreds of examples of the Ball family's commitments to community service, civic duty, and philanthropy. I also knew that several of the Ball wives had been DAR members. And so, as they say, the plot thickened. As I tried to understand why the Muncie DAR chapter would donate a historic marker that honors George Rogers Clark in Virginia. Well, I'm a better genealogist than a military historian. And that includes knowing much about what George Rogers Clark did in Indiana or anywhere else for that matter. However, his contemporaries, like Thomas Jefferson, credited him with significant military victories and with negotiations that opened the Northwest Territory to settlement by Americans instead of the British. Well, thanks to online newspaper databases, which are either a blessing or a curse, it's relatively easy to access thousands of articles published about what goes on in communities near and far. That's how I learned that in 1925, Frank C. Ball was appointed to the George Rogers Clark Memorial Commission. Their purpose was to create a memorial and celebration to commemorate the sesquicentennial of the notorious capture of Fort Sackville near Vincennes that was led by George Rogers Clark in 1979. The targeted date for the 150th anniversary, of course, was 1929. This historic project involved getting support from Congress, from the President of the United States, who at that time was Coolidge, getting state government funding, raising money from other sources, buying land, designing and building a memorial, planning celebrations, and more. It was 1929. The decade of the 20s is to be remembered for huge building projects everywhere, including Muncie. Last night, Muncie celebrated the 100th anniversary of the completion of the Masonic Lodge, now in use as the Cornerstone Center for Creative Arts. Frank C. Ball led that building campaign. It was to become one of the most impressive Masonic lodges of the time, and the fact that it's still in use today is pretty impressive as well. Well, at the same time that FC was behind this campaign, he was involved in funding and building Ball Memorial Hospital and Ball State Teachers College. He was also well known across the state, where he was involved in several other big projects, like building Riley Hospital in Indianapolis. Well, Karen Vincent recalls him being called a natural-born leader. A quote in an Indianapolis newspaper described his public spirit and patriotic zeal, and his name was floated around as a candidate for governor. He was an obvious choice to serve on this commission. Well, another member of the commission was an author, Ross Logridge Sr. He was an educator and a founder of the Allen County Historical Society. He was a noted history writer about Pioneer, Indiana, and he was writing a biography about George Rogers Clark. So the Clark family Fredericksburg home was just blocks away from the home of George Washington's mother, whose name was Mary Ball Washington. There's been speculation and family lore that the Muncie Balls were related to George Washington through his mother, but recently published family histories for both families don't show those connections. And the director of the George Washington Presidential Library, in recent correspondence with Chris, confirms that she isn't aware of any family relationship. And where is Henry Louis Gates when you need him? But that's not the only reason that the Paul Revere chapter might have donated a memorial in his honor. Lockridge completed the biography George Rogers Clark, Pioneer Hero of the Old Northwest, in 1927. in 1928 through what was described as the courtesy and liberal generosity of Bertha C. Ball, you recognize that name, and on behalf of the Paul Revere chapter, 2,500 copies of this book were distributed to DAR chapters across the country and to schools in the state of Indiana. In fact, they were accompanied by a letter claiming that the significance of Clark's accomplishments had been overlooked in teaching. I know we have several teachers in the room. And so they asked DAR chapters to advocate for using this book in their local schools. So they provided them as free copies. They were also successful in getting an endorsement from the Indiana State Board of Education, hoping that students would have a better understanding of the significance of these events in settling the Northwest. Books were also distributed to Ball Brothers employees and members of Muncie service clubs. The copy that I own was one of those. The Ball Brothers Company has a dedication in the cover of this one, which I think was owned by a sixth grader. The dedication says that if it weren't for Clark, the northern boundary the northern boundary at the close of the Revolution would have been the Ohio River instead of the Great Lakes, and the western boundary would have been the Alleghenies instead of the Mississippi River. Well, the planned memorial in Clark's Virginia hometown was dedicated on time, with a large Muncie contingent on hand. They had a special train. But numerous problems with funding caused the Indiana Memorial to be delayed. And so it was first delayed until funding was delayed until 1930, when Hoover was president, and in spite of the Depression, he did dedicate funds, but it was finally built and dedicated by Franklin Roosevelt in June 1936. Thomas Jefferson considered General Clark to be an accomplished surveyor, and correspondence that survived documents that he regularly shared his interests and concerns about sites for further exploration with him. However, he did not think that the general could lead that kind of westward expedition. So, following the completion of the Louisiana Purchase in 1903, he chose William, the youngest brother, who was living in Kentucky at the time, to head this expedition. Well, as many of you know, Chris Smith has been a teacher, a school administrator, a program director with Muncie Schools for nearly 25 years. You know or you've read about his lifelong interest in the infamous Lewis and Clark Historic Expedition that has been the subject of research, books, maps, television programs, college courses, further exploration, and of course, Ken Burns' attention. But most of us haven't been privileged until tonight to experience in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark from the perspective of Chris Smith, where we will pick up the story of William Clark's role in fulfilling Jefferson's dream. Tonight's program demonstrates the continuing philanthropy of the Ball family through two organizations and in this wonderful place. It's brought to you by the Delaware County Historical Society in celebration of America's 250th anniversary and with the generous sponsorship of the E.B. and Bertha Ball Center. As many of you know, Karen Vincent and Diane Waters make things happen. It's my privilege on behalf of the Delaware County Historical Society and the E.B. Ball Center to introduce Chris Smith.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm going to start off by saying I really feel at home here because I went down the hallway just to go to the restroom before I started. And I went down there, I turned the corner. This is going to mean a lot more to some people in this room that know me personally. But I walked down there and I turned the corner, and there's a bust of Thomas Jefferson staring me in the face. So my family that's here and my friends that know that means more to them about that than some of you. But again, thank you to everybody. I want to thank the EB and Bertha Ball Center. I want to thank Janine and Karen and Diane for giving me this opportunity to share with you a really meaningful experience that I was able to share. So I want to first kind of tell you a little bit about who I am. She mentioned some things, but as she mentioned, I'm currently a teacher at Muncie Central High School. I teach alternative ed students. I have graduated from Ball State twice. That's my family. My son was married up in Maine last fall, so that's a picture of that event. That's just me catching a fish in Colorado, I think. And then the other thing I do that a lot of people know me for is being a soccer referee. So that's a little bit about me, which is important. But more important is for me to tell you a little about who I am not. Okay? I am not a historian. I am not an expert. Okay? I was lucky enough to go on this wonderful trip. And I have some knowledge. And I remember many times on this trip thinking, before I went, that I knew some stuff about Lewis and Clark. But I remember so many times thinking, man, I thought I knew some stuff, but this is ridiculous. Like it was just so informational. So I am not an expert. I'm not Joseph Ellis. I've not written books about Thomas Jefferson. I'm not Stephen Ambrose. I didn't write a book about Lewis and Clark. And I'm not Clay Jenkinson, who is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about Lewis and Clark in the United States. So I am none of those people. I am not a historian. So if you can fact check me, that'd be wonderful, right? I won't get offended, okay? So I did get to go on this through a grant from Eli Lilly. They are called the Teacher Creativity Fellowship Program. As she mentioned, I've been a teacher for 25 years. And up until a year and a half ago, I did not even know that these things existed. There was a pile of postcards in the Muncie Central's office. I picked one up, and I had long dreamed of going on this kind of a trip. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try this. Because they emphasized giving teachers an opportunity to refresh themselves and what would re-energize them and give them a new focus or help them rejuvenate themselves, and it has certainly done that for me. They give out 125 of these each year for up to $15,000. I do have to say, though, that the grant writing thing is not me. I'm not a writer. So my wife helped me write the grant. It went like this. Hey, Amy, can you come in here and help me write this grant? is how it went to write this grant. And I have a couple people here with me, Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Yaden, who wrote recommendations letters for me to receive that grant. So very thankful to all of those people. So why did I choose this trip? The picture in the middle is a picture of a log cabin that, my grandfather built in the 1970s. And so I remember, I didn't grow up there, but I grew up going there. And when we would go, you always had to do work, but you also always had to find time to read. So as a 8, 9, 10-year-old boy, we would go, and on the shelf in his cabin was this book. And so every fall or summer or winter I would go, this book would stay there. And I'd pick it up, and I would read about the same 10 pages every time. Okay? So I have not read this book from front to back, okay? But this is the book that spurred the interest in me to go on this trip. That was the one big part of going on this trip. The other part is the other picture at the bottom right. That gentleman is Clay Jenkinson, and I came across him years ago listening to a podcast called the Thomas Jefferson Hour, where he would portray Thomas Jefferson, and people would interview him, and he gave all these podcasts about being Thomas Jefferson. And outside of that, he also hosts these trips on the Lewis and Clark Trail. He's done it for 25 years. And that's where I thought, oh man, if I could ever go on that trip, that's what I would do. And so that's why I chose this trip for my teacher creativity grant. Okay, all right, that part's over. All right, so a little refresher in case it's been a while since you've heard anything about Lewis and Clark. But they were commissioned by President Jefferson after the Louisiana Purchase to explore the West and hopefully find an all-water route to the Pacific Ocean. They traveled about 8,000 miles. There were about 40 members. Sacagawea, I've heard it pronounced 5 other different ways too. She served as a guide and an interpreter. They created some very detailed maps of the West, and they reached the Pacific Ocean in November of 1805. Okay? So about 220 years ago, that time frame. So this was their trail. I did not follow this path. Okay? I think that no, doesn't. Uh-oh. Okay. So where you see the Great Falls is where I started. So I flew from here to Great Falls. We did some stuff around the Great Falls. We were in a canoe for a couple days on the Missouri River. Then we got on a bus and we drove to where you see it says Shoshone Nez Perce. And we drove in a bus and got there, and that's where we spent our mountain portion. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of maybe a mental picture of where I was. But I did not start in St. Louis and follow the trail to Fort Clatsop. Okay, that's not what I did. So one of the things over these next couple of slides that I want to bring out, and hopefully this will be kind of a recurring theme, okay, is that like I said, I was lucky enough to experience parts of the Lewis and Clark Trail. Okay? I saw some things, exactly as they saw them. I walked where they walked. I slept where they slept. I saw what they saw. But my experience was not their experience. Okay? And so these next couple of slides are going to talk about, okay, what did they have versus what did I have? What did they eat versus what did I eat? How did they travel versus how did I travel? Okay? So, they would have started off with things, flint, fire starters, muskets, gunpowder, ammunition, beads, mirrors, things that they were going to trade with the natives to get horses or help them, maybe give them information or whatever it might be. They would have had journals and ink for recording. Journaling and creating maps and drawings was a big part of what Jefferson would have expected them to do. Okay, versus my technical gear, I've got a down sleeping bag, a water bottle, waterproof backpack, I had a GoPro, extra batteries, a chest harness for my GoPro. I had biodegradable wipes, which were a huge hit in the camp. Okay, if you've gone 2 or 3 showers with 2 or 3 days without a shower, and somebody hands you a biodegradable wipe that smells like mint, you will think you are in a good place. Okay, so those went like hotcakes each night. Okay, so how did they dress versus how did I dress? So they would have had a lot of buckskin, a lot of heavy, non-waterproof fabrics, right? Leather moccasins that they were continually having to repair or make new. had very, very minimal protection from the weather, right? Versus I had UV protective fabrics. I had waterproof raincoat. I had polarized sunglasses. I had cushioned socks. I had on those, wicking t-shirts that you take off and you throw on top of your tent and it's dry 10 minutes later, right? They had on, thick, heavy wool that would never dry, right? So lots of big differences there. How did they navigate themselves? How did they find their way? Some hand-drawn maps, compass, sextant, latitude, longitude, stars, no weather forecasting other than, it might be raining here pretty soon because there's a big gray cloud over there, right? I could pull up a weather app and know, okay, tomorrow we're going to the Bitterroot Mountains and it's going to be 82 degrees and sunny. So I could take my smartphone for my navigation and know exactly where I'm going to go. I could snap a picture and send it to my wife and say, here's our trip we're taking today in the car, in the bus. We had topographical maps. We had everything. How did they move from one place to another? Well, they would have had one large keel boat, which is what you would see up at the top left with the oars, all the oars coming out of it. They spent lots of times hand digging out canoes. They were traveling by foot over long distances, portaging across falls or across places that they couldn't get their boats, right? They just, versus, I'm in a canoe, was on a school bus for a little bit. We took a customized motor coach from Great Falls to the Laxaw Lodge. I was never on a pontoon boat on the water. But as we're paddling down the canoes, right, you'd be paddling along and all of a sudden you hear, and here comes this pontoon boat with all of our supplies that the guides are taking, our sleeping bags, our cookware, our tents, our cots, all of our stuff just kind of motoring on down the river, and we're kind of paddling along, right? What did we eat and what did they eat? Well, I have never had any of this stuff. Okay? I've never had pemmican. I've never had salt pork. I've hunted, but I've never had to rely on it to eat. And I think, thankfully, I've never had dehydrated soup because I don't think it was very tasty. And they were always worried about, is my food going to spoil? Or are we going to have enough? Or, all those kinds of worries. I never had those worries. Okay? I knew every morning that the guys were going to wake up, and I would wake up to the propane tanks turning on to boil water for coffee and have pancakes and eggs and cantaloupe and maple syrup and all of those things that you think make a good breakfast. I always had a protein bar in my backpack. I always had some trail mix. Our meals were salmon, steak, chicken, potatoes. Every night we'd come into camp and there'd be 2 coolers full of beer and wine and anything else you wanted to drink. Okay. So along my trip, there were 5 kind of key highlights that I want to be able to share with you. One is called Decision Point. One is called Eagle Camp, the White Cliffs, a place called Slaughter Camp, and the Windover Ridge Hike. Those were kind of the 5 key points that I want to be able to share with you. The first one is Decision Point. And Lewis and Clark were there on June 2nd of 1805. Okay, Private Smith that's me. Okay. I was there on July the 21st of 2025. Okay? So, Decision Point was very key for a couple of reasons, and we're going to talk about those. But before I do, I'm going to read to you a couple of journal entries. So this first journal entry will be from Private Joseph Whitehouse. We camped at a fork of the river. We could not determine which one was the Missouri. And then this one from Meriwether Lewis on June the 3rd. This morning early, we passed over and formed a camp on the point formed by the junction of the two large rivers. Here, in the course of the day, I continued my observations. An interesting question was now to be determined. Which of these rivers was the Missouri? To mistake the stream at this period of the season would not only lose us the whole of this season, but would probably so dishearten the party that it might defeat the expedition altogether. So Decision Point was a place they came to that they did not expect to come to. They did not expect to find a fork in the Missouri River. And so they got there, okay, and they're like, okay, which one is the Missouri? And you can hear in their journals the importance of if we choose the wrong one, we're in trouble. We're in trouble because winter could be coming. We're wasting time. We're in trouble, maybe in Lewis and Clark's mind, we're in trouble if we choose the wrong one. The rest of the guys aren't going to have a lot of confidence in us the rest of this trip if we make this decision incorrectly. So what they did is they took the next 10 days to decide which fork to take. And they sent small groups up each fork for, you go up this fork, you take these 3 guys and go up this fork, you take these 3 guys and go up this fork, come back and tell me what you saw. So they did that, and they didn't come back with good information. So then Lewis went up one fork, and Clark went up one fork. And then they met back, and they said, I don't know. So finally, Lewis determined that the Missouri River was the Missouri River they needed to take because it was more headed in the direction they wanted to go, and the water was muddier and more like the Missouri they had already been on. Okay? So those were kind of the 2 key things that helped them decide, okay, this we think is the right river. But it took them 10 days. And it wasn't, they'd send these guys out and they came back, send these guys out, they come back. And then when Lewis and Clark went out, Clark came back, but Lewis didn't come back right away. So then for 2 days, Clark's like, well, where did Lewis go, right? So there was a lot of indecision at Decision Point, but ultimately, thankfully, they made the right decision. So this is actually a picture I took standing on top of a little rounded hill. And you can see the then and the now. Can you tell the difference which one's the one I took and which one's the... so you can see really like it's not that different. Like it's not that different in those 2 pictures. So again, I'm seeing what they saw, right? Exactly what they saw. So finally, they reach what they were looking for, which was the Great Falls of the Missouri. So,
was it the right fork?
Yes, yes. I had proceeded on this course about 2 miles, with Goodrich at some distance behind me, when my ears were saluted with the agreeable sound of a fall of water, and, advancing a little farther, I saw the spray arise above the plain like a column of smoke, which would frequently disappear again in an instant, caused, I presume, by the wind, which blew pretty hard from the southwest. I did not, however, lose my direction to this point, which soon began to make a roaring too tremendous to be mistaken for any cause short of the Great Falls of the Missouri, which is exactly what they wanted to find. So this is what he would have seen. Now, another thing that they didn't know at this point was that when they thought that when they got to the Great Falls, they would think, okay, we just need to get our stuff over these falls. But there were like 5 other falls. So for like a month, they were carrying back and forth, like I think it's like an 18-mile trek. They would take their stuff and they'd go a little bit, and then they'd come back and get some more stuff, and they'd take it back up to that spot, and then they'd come back up this way, and they'd take some more stuff. And it took them a long time to get and portage all of their stuff across those different falls. This is what I saw. Okay, and if you see the then and the now, again, yeah, are there some structures that are there now that weren't there then? Yes. But it's the bottom part that, to me, is strikingly the same. Okay, Eagle Camp was the first place that we actually camped. So we got on the river July the 21st of 2025 is when we got onto the Missouri River in our canoes. And keep in mind that when I'm on the river, we are canoeing downriver. So we have the benefit of the current. They did not. They were going up with all of their stuff. So this is the Eagle Camp. Some of our food. Those were the tents we had. There's all of our canoes, and you can see the pontoon boats there with all of our stuff unloaded. So this is where we stayed here on the night of the 21st of July. So one thing that we were able to do that Lewis and Clark would have never done on their trip is that we were able to explore a little bit beyond where we were. So both nights when we camped at Eagle Camp and later on Slaughter Camp, we took these little side hikes. And so when we were at Eagle Camp, we took a side hike in a place called the Slot Canyon. And it's just a hike that's like a slot in a canyon. Like it's just like you kind of had to walk like this most of the time through the hike. And every once in a while you would come to this little, like an obstacle that you had to get over or get down or whatever. So this is a video that I'm going to show you. It's like 5 minutes long. We're not going to watch the whole video. But I'm going to kind of stop it at a couple points because I want to point some things out to you. So the hand you see down here is one of the guides. The other hand up there is me. And I think it's just the teacher in me that I went down first, and I'm helping these other people come down with the guide. So what people are going to do is kind of have to slide on their butt down that side of that rock and put their feet kind of like down here somewhere. But as we go through, if you look over here on the left, there's like a little rut in the side of the canyon, on the side of the rock. And I kind of want you, as we go along, to, as you're looking, just make sure you keep an eye on that, okay?
So far.
So there's not, you don't really pay attention to the words,
Okay, you ready to
but
hug
just
me?
kind of
Hold it,
watch.
get
You'll
that-
see
yeah,
that
them.
one right there.
And just kind of go slow.
Yeah, take it as slow as you want.
No hurries, no worries.
There you go.
Beautiful. Okay, and then
Yeah, you're on the footholds
slide
there.
down and sit here and kind of scoot from there.
Okay.
So the other put her butt right there.
I put
But I
my
want
butt on
somebody,
there
can you
now.
grab me? when
Yeah,
I'm
you
down
can
here?
jump
And then-
whatever you want to do.
Wait. I kind of want to, like this. 1, 2.
There you go.
Oh yeah. Okay, that works.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Whoa.
Here's your
See
sit.
y'all later.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, you wouldn't want to do that.
And then
Right there.
Okay. Now,
And then you can put your butt where your feet are now if you want to.
I don't know how to,
Or-
I don't know how to advance
Yep.
it.
all right.
But
Beautiful.
eventually what will happen okay, is it starts to
You
hail.
got 2 footholds here.
Y'all understand momentum.
Yes,
Okay.
we got it.
And then it starts to rain.
Hold on to that.
And it starts to rain a little harder.
You just there you go. Now you're in the right slot.
Now if you kind of
So,
slide your
and it starts to rain a little harder. And it starts to rain a little harder. And down that, you can see there's just a little bit of mud down there at the bottom. Okay? But eventually, it is pouring. Okay? And there is water just gushing down the side of that little rut.
Can you see the?
Okay.
That's where your feet go.
And you can hear the guide.
You can go down the next.
There are other
slide on
guides that are
route.
still at the top.
Give you a little bit
And
more.
you can see it on her
arm's
face.
length.
And you can hear her talking to the guide.
And you
And
can
she's
slide
like,
down,
we have got to get these people out
put
of
your
here.
butt where your feet are.
Right? And it's thunder, and there's, you know, it's actually really kind of scary. Quite hot.
Hailing.
So that happens. And we're probably, you know, most hikes, it's like one big loop, right? You start at one point, and then eventually you come back to kind of that same point. So this is like the farthest point away. This is when we're going this direction, and we're turning around, we're coming down, and we're getting ready to go back this direction.
Yeah. Now you
Okay?
go.
So
There you go.
trust me, it really does start raining. And the water is above our ankles, and it's like, okay, this is like a flash flood. Like we could be in trouble here.
Well, you can, or you can put your butt where your feet are.
There were about, if we included the guides, like about 24 people.
Yep.
Hey, you ready to hug me?
Hold it. Get that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is another obstacle. So we left what you just saw, and we proceeded on down the thing a couple hundred yards. And you can see the light. Well, the trail we were on is that light, okay? So we all had to come down that. Okay, so the water is probably calf high that we're standing in. And we had to like
So the guide
shimmy yourself down that waterfall.
80 times, you say roughly?
And the guide had done this. She had done this hike 80 times. Never seen this happen before. Never. So you may be thinking, well, why are you showing me this? What does this have to do with Lewis and Clark? Well, I didn't know this before I left, but Clay, our resident expert, when we get back to the camp, he's like, "Oh my God, guys, wasn't that great? That was just great." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Guys, that was such an authentic experience. Lewis and Clark got caught in a flash flood. Not here in Slot Canyon, but near the Great Falls. They were caught in a flash flood." And this is Clark's recollection of the flash flood. "The first shower was moderate, accompanied with a violent wind, the effects of which we did not feel. Soon after, a torrent of rain and hail fell more violently than ever I saw before. The rain fell like one volley of water falling from the heavens, and gave us time only to get out of the way of a torrent of water which was pouring down the hill and the river with immense force, tearing everything before it, taking with it large rocks and mud. I took my gun and shot pouch in my left hand, and with the right scrambled up the hill, pushing the interpreter's wife, that's Sacagawea, who had her child in her arms, that's Pump, her baby, before me, the interpreter himself making attempts to pull up his wife by the hand, much scared and nearly without motion. We at length reached the top of the hill, safe, where I found my servant, his name's York, in search of us, greatly agitated for our welfare." And here's a picture of Clark at the bottom, Charbonneau at the top, and Sacagawea in the middle with her baby in her arms, trying to get out of this flash flood. So it was a very authentic experience. Okay, so that was Eagle Camp. So we leave Eagle Camp, and we we're told, Clay would tell us, okay guys, we're getting ready to get in our canoes. This is like 8:30 in the morning. What I want you to do is get out there, start canoeing, get down the river a little bit, and then stop and turn your canoes around. Because in order to see what they saw, we had to turn our canoes around because we were going downriver and they were going up. So this was Private Patrick Gass's journal entry about the White Cliffs. We passed some very curious cliffs and rocky peaks in a long range. Some of them are 200 feet high and not more than 8 feet thick. They seem as if they were built by the hand of man and are so numerous that they appear like the ruins of an ancient city. In Clark's entry, as we passed on, it seemed as if those scenes of visionary enchantment would never have an end. For here it is, too, that nature presents to the view of the traveler vast ranges of walls of tolerable workmanship. That was Lewis. And then Clark. In many places we observe on either side of the river extraordinary walls of a black cemented stone, which appears to be regularly placed one stone on the other. So, in the middle, this is day 2 on the Missouri. We just turned our canoe around. You can see the White Cliffs there behind us. It's about 9:30 in the morning or so. Just heading down the river. We're supposed to go about 20 miles. So those are the White Cliffs as they would have seen them. So again, I'm seeing what they saw.
Where are they exactly geographically?
On the Missouri River. Between Eagle Camp and Judith Landing, okay? But latitude and longitude or city-wise,
Or state?
a state would have been in Montana. Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So there's a picture. So again, kind of a then and now. Now, one thing I want you to know, want to point out in case you didn't notice, but you see the picture in the top left. Okay, the guys that are standing in the water, they're not like swimming. Okay, this isn't rec time. They're actually in the water, ropes over their shoulders, pulling this boat up the river against the current. And then you have probably, there's some other guys back there in the back and some guys on land and, you know. Okay, slaughter camp. Lewis and Clark actually stayed at slaughter camp twice, once on the way out and once on the way back. So May 29th of 1805 and July 29th of 1806. Private Smith was there July 22nd of 2025. So this was a journal entry about slaughter camp. So today we passed on the starboard side the remains of a vast, many mangled carcasses of buffalo which had been driven over a precipice of 120 feet by the Indians and perished. The water appeared to have washed away a part of this immense pile of slaughter, and still there remained the fragments of at least 100 carcasses. They created a most horrid stench. In this manner, the Indians of the Missouri destroy vast herds of buffalo at a stroke, which is true. They did do that. They would stampede vast amounts of buffalo over a cliff, fall down, more Indians on the bottom, killing off the rest of the buffalo, and that's how they would often hunt buffalo. But historians don't really think that that's really what those buffalo were there from in this particular case. They think it was more they maybe got caught in another flash flood, there was a thawing, and they got caught and they drowned, and it was maybe more that than an actual stampede. But Indians did do that. So this is what our slaughter camp looked like. That little awning right there, that little pop-up thing, that's where the guides slept, underneath that. They didn't have tents. They just slept on the ground. And you can see all of our tents back there in the background. I had a tent to myself. And there's where you went to the restroom, that little shack right there.
What was, like, morning to night, what was your typical day?
Usually, most people were just got up at their whatever time they got up. So I was usually up, one of the first people that was up, like 6 o'clock or whatever. And then you usually ate breakfast at like 8, maybe on the water by 9. You eat lunch at noon. You get to camp at 4 to 5. Eat dinner. Yeah.
Watch the news?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is an authentication marker, right? This was on the ground at Slaughter Camp that shows Lewis and Clark stayed here on these dates. Authenticated. Like, we know that's where they slept. How do you think they know that's where they slept? Journals. They would say, they would track, okay, we camped here, there's a river 100 yards off to the west, or there's a mountain with this particular thing that stands out, landmark or whatever, and they could pinpoint it that way. And that is most of the time how they knew how historians know where they were. But there's another way that they could track them, that they knew that's where they stayed. Mercury and the latrines. How did you know that? There you go. We are together. Okay? Mercury and the latrines. So a lot of the men, or most of them, were almost constantly being treated with mercury for venereal disease. Yeah. So when you are injected with mercury, or you take mercury, or whatever you do, it's mercury, right? We don't really see much of it anymore. So when it would pass through you. So when you went to the restroom, dig a latrine, they didn't dig latrines every time, right? But when they were going to be someplace for a day or two or whatever, they would dig a latrine. And so archaeologists would uncover or dig them up and find mercury. And they knew that's where this must be where they stayed, or somewhere close by. Okay? But that's a little authentication from the bicentennial of Lewis and Clark, is when they put those in. So there's another then and now picture. Okay, so this was the highlight of the trip. Okay, this was the thing that I was looking forward to doing the most, was going on the Windover Trail hike. So they did it in September of 1805, and I was there in July of 2025. The Windover Trail is a hike up a mountain that's about at least 7 miles, and you gain about 3,000 feet of elevation. And it took us about 6 hours. So think of, okay, I don't know how many of you go on treadmills, or if you've ever walked on a treadmill. Most people probably have. If you've ever done any kind of incline training, think of getting on the treadmill, bumping it up, you maybe get to 2.5, 3 miles an hour, and you start pushing the incline thing. And then when you get to about 10, you can stop. And that would be about what the incline of this mountain would be like. So this is a sign. This is a sign that's still there. These are pictures at different the top right, bottom left are pictures that I took at different points along the trail. So this is a quote that before we headed up the Wendover Trail, Clay read us this quote, and it's just, we set out early, the morning cloudy, and proceeded on down the right side of the river over steep points, rocky and brushy as usual, for 4 miles to an old fishing place. Here the road leaves the river to the left and ascends a mountain, winding in every direction. To get up the steep ascents and to pass the immense quantity of fallen timber which had fallen from different causes, that is, fire and wind, and has deprived the greater part of the south sides of this mountain of its timber. 4 miles up the mountain, I found a spring and halted for the rear to come up and let our horses rest and feed. In about 2 hours, the rear of the party came up much fatigued, and horses more so. Several horses slipped and rolled down steep hills, which hurt them very much. The one which carried my desk and small trunk turned over and rolled down a mountain for 40 yards, lodged against a tree, broke the desk. The horse escaped and appeared but little hurt. From this point, I observed a range of high mountains covered with snow from southeast to southwest, with their tops bald or void of timber. After 2 hours' delay, we proceeded on up the mountain. When we arrived at the top, we conceived we could find no water and concluded to camp and make use of snow we found on top to cook the remain of our colt and make our soup. 2 of our horses gave out, poor and too much hurt to proceed, and left in the rear. Nothing killed today except 2 pheasants. So when I'm on this trail, okay, and you're going to see a short little video of me walking on this trail. About every 5 minutes, well, not every 5 minutes, but every time I would stop to catch my breath or take a drink or whatever, I would think, I'm walking up this trail. Okay, I have on lightweight pants and hiking shoes, and I got a backpack on and a bottle of water. And they're doing it with 40 men, 30 horses, packed full of hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds of equipment, up this same path. I mean, the exact same path. So that's the trail.
Officially on the wind hike. This has been about what the trail looks like so far. You've probably been
Why was
hiking
there
about
a trail there at all? It's an Indian trail?
Yes,
20 minutes maybe.
buffalo. They would follow the buffalo.
Garmin watch has already told me that I've reached my stair goal 4 times.
Yeah, 20 minutes in, I'd reached my stair goal 4 times. I wish I could remember. I think it was like 33 times, 33 times whatever your stair goal is.
So once you cross that, you got to finish it. So
And keep in mind, like this, it's like here, it's we're in July. In September, it's snow covered, and they're walking in moccasins that are not. So this is another little video. This is Clay.
Okay, so I'm here with Clay. We're, what would you say, 2/3 of the way over?
We're about a mile, 5.8, maybe 6. The worst is yet to come. This, you can see the view here. We're essentially on the top of the Bitter Mountains. We're just a few 100 yards from the ancient Nez Perce Trail, the trail to the Buffalo. Lewis and Clark came up exactly on the same path we're using today. We're one of the few groups that ever does this because it's a really good hike. You suffer a fair amount on it, but it's in every way just magnificent. You should consider coming on one of these trips. It's strenuous, but you'll be so glad that and everybody who sets out, whether they're 7 years old or 87, gets to the top, and then we have an extraordinary celebration around the campfire. Go to America.org.
25.
Tales into this every summer.
Yeah. 25.
Perfect.
Yeah. How old was he? Almost 70. So there's, again, some then and now pictures.
So how much training did you do before you went on this trip, knowing that you were going to hike stuff?
Yeah, so as I said, I referee soccer a lot, so my cardio is decent, but I did do a lot of like incline walking on a treadmill and like the Stairmaster things at the Y, all that kind of stuff. I did do that because I didn't want to be a person that got up there and couldn't do it, right? Yeah.
How about wildlife?
I didn't experience as much wildlife as I thought I would. We did see some bald eagles here or there, but we didn't see like bison or anything like that, or didn't see as many wild animals as I thought I would. So as I kind of close, I always kind of feel like sometimes once I've accomplished something, that you always kind of look back to the beginning and look back to kind of where you started. When you get to the end, look back to where you started and see what you've come through. So this would have been Jefferson's instructions to Lewis, among lots of other things, right? The object of your mission is to explore the Missouri River in such principal stream of it by its communication with the Pacific Ocean may offer the most direct and practicable water communication across this continent for the purposes of commerce. So, so this is like 220 years, right? 220 years difference. And Jefferson gave Lewis and Clark a mission to explore and document and push into the unknown. They didn't have maps, they didn't have certainty, but they went anyway. This trip gave me a small glimpse into what that might have felt like. To navigate unfamiliar terrain, to rely on preparation, and to experience the land in a way that reading in the journals can't provide. So while my journey was easier than theirs, it gave me a much deeper appreciation for what they accomplished. So again, I want to thank the E.B. and Bertha Ball Center. I want to thank Diane, Janine, Karen, my wife. She made this presentation. I can get up here and talk. It doesn't bother me. But I can't make these kinds of things. And she has been so supportive from the moment I came home with that little postcard. And so thank you for that. I want to thank Clay Jenkinson. I want to thank Liz and Russ Eagle. And if there are any of my fellow travelers who are watching tonight, I want to thank you, and I want to say hello to all of you. I often think of you and how you made this trip so memorable. So thank you again. This was the grandest sight I ever beheld. And if you have further questions, I'm happy to take some questions. But if you have other questions, or if you are a member of another organization that you think would benefit from hearing me get up here and ramble on about Lewis and Clark, I'd love to bring this on the road. So if you know of an organization that wants to do that, you can contact me at my number or on email. So again, thank you very much.
We've got time for a couple of questions if you have some questions, and then after that we can continue our conversations downstairs at the reception.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that you all know there is a lovely reception downstairs for casual conversation as well. So.
Go ahead, sir.
Did they finish on the Columbia River?
Yes.
That was the route?
Yes, to the West Coast and Fort Clatsop. And then when they came back, Lewis and Clark took separate routes. They kind of They started off together, and then they kind of branched off, and then met back up, and then finished off together. But they did take a little bit separate routes on the way back. Yes, sir.
My understanding is that President Jefferson wanted them to find a navigable waterway to the Pacific. They
Mhm.
had no clue about the interior of what we now know as the United States. So at what point did they, in their journey, did they decide, this is not happening? So how do we continue our journey? And should we even continue our journey?
Yeah.
Can you talk to that just a little bit, that decision process?
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer, but I want to say when they got to the mountains, that they kind of knew, okay, we're not going to find an all-water route, okay? But that wasn't, while that's the main, was one of their main purposes, they also had other smaller purposes of, communicating with natives and discovering the geography. And Clay would mention to us that there was one point on the trip where where Lewis and Clark were trying to find how far north, they were trying to find the right line of latitude, how far north did the Louisiana Purchase go, right? So there were other things that they needed to accomplish other than just that. But yeah, there was certainly a time where they thought, okay, that part isn't going to come to fruition.
I just think it's interesting that they had this mission and they kept going even though that parameter of the mission was no longer achievable.
Yeah.
It was amazing that they just kept going.
Yeah.
And they found a way to get across those mountains to get to the Pacific.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of you might know this, but one thing that was always amazing to me is that they went this whole trip, 8,000-mile round trip. One person died. One person. And probably from maybe a ruptured appendix or something like that. It wasn't like he was shot by an Indian or mauled by a bear or whatever. It was, yeah, mercury poisoning. Yeah.
Did you tell us how many days you were on the trail?
Yeah, so it was 10 days for me. Yeah. So we were on the water for 3, and then we went back and we could kind of, shower and do some things. And then the next day we traveled, and then the next day we were in the mountains for 2 nights and 3 days. And there were so many other cool places that there were 2 other places. One was called the Indian Post Office, which is the very top of Wendover Ridge, and that we had lunch at, and it was just amazing and lots of cool stuff I'd love to be able to talk about, but just don't have the time to do it. And there was another place called the Smoking Place that the Indians took them, and it was a very special, solemn place where the Indians would go to smoke, to share with people, and so we visited that. So just a lot of cool things outside of a little bit of what you saw today. Yeah. And one thing that strikes me too, or struck me, was that their dealings with the Indians is just amazing to me. That here are these white men who are basically entrusting their lives to native people that don't look like them, don't act like them, don't believe what they believe, but we're basically entrusting them with, hey, could you tell me where to go? What should we look for when we get here? Can you give us horses? We'll give you these beads and feathers if you'll give us horses. I mean, so it would not have been possible, would never have been possible without the natives that they met at different points along the way for a wide variety of reasons. Yeah. I keep thinking of all these interesting things I want to tell you too. But Sacagawea was a Shoshone. She was kidnapped when she was young by a Hidatsa tribe. She was sold to Charbonneau, who married her. He had multiple wives, I think. And so when they get to Fort Mandan, they meet Charbonneau. He's like, oh yeah, I'll come along. I can help you. My wife's an interpreter. She'll help you with the horses. When you get to see the Shoshones, she'll help you. She's Shoshone. She can help you interpret and get your horses. So, okay, sure, come along. So they get there, and I don't know exactly how long Sacagawea was a captive. Probably, I want to say 15 years, maybe 20. And so they finally meet up with the Shoshones. Here's this Shoshone chief, Kameawait, and they meet this chief, and it's Sacagawea's brother, like that she had never seen in half her life. And it's by pure coincidence, the person who's going to help them across the thing with these horses is her brother. So there's so many little things about the natives that they met that were amazing. Yes, sir.
Is Clay still doing this?
Yeah, he has. Yeah, they're going on a trip this summer. Yep, going on a trip this summer.
He had to be invaluable.
I mean, it just, he just a wealth of information.
You want to put a shout out to his blog?
Yeah, if you, there was, when the captions were going along, Listening to America is the podcast, the place where you can go to get all of this information. And he gives tours, takes tours, Jefferson tours to France. He hosts winter retreats on Thoreau and the water in the West and all kinds of great information. So listeningtoamerica.org, LTAmerica.org. Yep. Thank you. Yep.
One more and then we'll need to wrap it up.
Were you able to visit any of the Lewis and Clark sites around Great Falls?
Yeah, I did. I actually went a day early, so flew out a day early, and I went to the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center in Great Falls, and took like a half a morning and just walked miles around and took pictures and little videos. I did. If you guys are on social media, you can try to look me up, and I did stories, Instagram stories. My wife turned me on to it. And I chronicled everything about what I did along the way, and they're really, really pretty cool, I have to say. Little video clips and things that I did. But yes, I did. I went a day early and was able to track some of that stuff.
Did you see the Sulphur Spring or Giant Spring?
No, I did not. No.
All right, well, thank you again, and let's go down.
All right, thank you.